On This Week in Enterprise Tech, it's all the enterprise goodness of Windows 10, plus the evolution of BYOD. Twiat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 151, recorded July 31st, 2015, Windows 10 and Endpoint Security. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Igloo Software. Igloo is an internet you'll actually like. Use blogs, calendars, file sharing, forums, task management, and wikis to work better together with your teams. Sign up now and try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit. And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post at 100+ job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/Twiat. And by Veridesk. Convert your existing desk or cubicle into a standing desk. Veridesk is height adjustable and lets you easily switch between sitting and standing. To learn more, visit Veridesk.com. That's VARI desk.com. Welcome to Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. But of course, I ain't guiding you alone. I'm back at full strength with my regular crew, starting with Mr. Brian, I was in Alaska, Chee. Cheebert, how are you feeling back from the cold regions of the Earth?
I'm actually got a cold.
Oh.
So, yeah, one of the guys in the tour group decided, oh, I only have COPD, but I'm going to have a wet, gurgling hack and cough crap all over everybody.
So, I mean, you're not going to die during the episode, are you? Because that would be bad.
No, I went to the doctor, got some good drugs.
Okay. All right. So this is a completely, at least 1/3 drugged out episode of Twiat. Now, a member of the group who I'm pretty sure isn't currently on pharmaceuticals, Mr. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Curtis, tell me that you're not feeling cold and fluish.
Neither cold nor fluish, although I seem to remember that Wet Gurgling Hack was a band that was playing at a club down close to the university a couple of weeks ago. So I think Brian's in good shape.
That's my Rush cover band, by the way, just so you know, Wet Gurgling Hack. Well, gentlemen, how about this? Let's go ahead and jump straight into the blips. Now, this first one is all about how Microsoft deals with the impending doom of the Exoflood. Now, with the release of Windows 10, millions of Windows 7 and 8 users downloaded petabytes, literally petabytes, of data in a relatively short period of time. Now, for most companies, a crush like that would bring servers to a grinding halt. Luckily, Microsoft has some experience when it comes to data floods. According to the streaming media blog, Microsoft reserved upwards of 40 terabits per second of capacity for major content distribution networks around the globe. As of early Tuesday, Microsoft was seeing a constant flow of about 10 terabits per second, with spikes up to 30 terabits per second. Unfortunately, though Microsoft did the prep work for the backbone, the interconnects of many ISPs are straining under the load, and there are widespread reports of slow download speeds and extremely unhelpful "something has happened" error screens. Still, good on you, Microsoft.
Welcome to the Big Blue IoT. IBM is launching a new Internet of Things community called IBM DeveloperWorks Recipes, aimed at IoT developers. The community is designed to help developers of all skill levels learn how to connect IoT devices to the cloud and how to use the data that comes from those connected devices. IBM gives examples of the kinds of project recipes that it is encouraging in the community, including things like understanding vehicle performance by analyzing the data from its onboard diagnostic system, as well as linking real-time machine condition monitoring with IBM Asset Management to track everything from the health of household appliances to wheels on a railroad car. The recipes on the site do tend to utilize Bluemix, IBM's platform as a service. Now, Bluemix has an open source focus and uses Docker containers as a delivery method across multiple platforms. IBM will let smaller developers play for free, adding fees as feature and instant counts climb. For IBM, as long as the IoT will let them in the door, they're convinced developers will be happy going big blue.
Well, speaking of big giant corporations, AT&T is trying to wiggle out of paying the $100 million fine for throttling. They say no one got hurt. In trying to justify why they shouldn't have to pay the $100 million fine for throttling so-called unlimited customers, they're saying they did due diligence on informing the customers about the policy, and oh, by the way, the statute of limitations has run out on these cases. The FCC said they could have levied $16,000 per violation, but wanted the fine to be big enough to be a deterrent, but not astronomical. What's really interesting is that just a couple months ago, the verbiage on the agreement changed to only throttling during times of network congestion. So AT&T wiggles on the FCC hook, and only time will tell if the FCC lands big fish.
Good news. GM responded quickly to an exploit. Bad news, they responded kind of half-assedly. On Thursday morning, a security researcher by the name of Sami Kamkar announced a device called the OnStar that he claimed could intercept communications between an OnStar-equipped vehicle and the GM Remote Link application. In the YouTube video, Kamkar demonstrated how he could use the OnStar to control door locks, lights, GPS, the engine, and other in-vehicle systems. GM was quick to respond, patching GM servers within hours, but unfortunately, he reported later in the day that the fix was incomplete and that he was still able to run a man-in-the-middle attack with impunity. For its part, GM is working with the researcher to create a full patch for the app.
HP picks Staccato. Last October, HP launched the Helion development platform, HP's public cloud version of Platform as a Service. They built it on a version of Cloud Foundry called Staccato, which was founded by ActiveState. What no one at the time said publicly was that HP selected Staccato because it included a user interface designed around ease of use, while Cloud Foundry, the open source project, offered only a command line interface. According to HP's Senior Vice President of Cloud and Service Management, Bill Hilth, the move, quote, reinforces HP's focus on driving Cloud Foundry as the open standard cloud native application platform, end quote. The Staccato acquisition makes HP one of the few cloud providers with a commercial stake in Cloud Foundry and might provide the company some leverage as it begins to compete with the likes of Amazon in the public development cloud.
In what really feels like a perpetual motion scam, IBM is doing experiments to cool data centers with their own waste heat. In what feels like perpetual motion scam, IBM is experimenting with using heat to cool. The big trick is to use adsorption instead of absorption, where one is like a sponge and the material is soaked up in the matrix of the material, and adsorption, where the material, either a liquid or gas, coats the outside of the material. By going to adsorption, IBM is able to run the heat profile up into the 60 centigrade temperature range to run the heat pump. This really sounds like something you'd be hearing about from your uncle in Nigeria, but apparently this works, and IBM thinks it's got something there.
The past few weeks have seen a bonanza of car hacking announcements, from the penetration of the Fiat Chrysler Uconnect smart card network to the NCC Group's use of the digital audio broadcast sideband shotgun exploit to Cars and Range, to GM's OnStar getting owned. It's almost as if the smart car network exploits are getting passé. Well, I guess it's a good thing then that Colby Moore and security firm Synac have a vehicle hack that isn't for cars, it's for semi-trucks. Colby will be at Black Hat DEF CON to discuss vulnerabilities he found in the Global Star asset tracking system used by many trucking companies. The exploit allows attackers to track valuable or sensitive cargoes, spoof locations of the trucks, or make them disappear from tracking altogether. The attack comes down to sniffing the unencrypted and unauthenticated Simplex satellite data network used by Global Star to spoof, jam, or otherwise hinder communications. Moore notified Global Star 6 months ago, but the company was non-committal to a patch, probably because the network can't really be re-architected without replacing it. Keep on trucking. Well, when we come back, we're going to be jumping into the enterprise well, what are we doing now? Bytes, that's right, because we need to talk about Windows 10. Windows 10 was a big release this last week, and it's not just for consumers. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the first sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and it's Igloo. That's right. Now let me ask you this. Do you remember when the corporate internet was the cutting edge of business/enterprise communication? That's right. All of the data that you need, all the tools that you need at your fingertips. It was a nice way to look at, oh, well, a private internet just for us. Well, that was great years and years and years ago, but we really haven't used that because, well, let's face it, corporate internets are slow, mismanaged, misdesigned, and just ugly. That's why we're happy to have Igloo as a supporter of the Twilight Riot. Igloo is an intranet that you'd actually like to use. It's a cloud portal that enables you to share files, collaborate on documents, blog updates, coordinate calendars, and manage projects, all from the same attractive and intuitive interface. Igloo leverages the best part of an intranet, important enterprise-specific data at your fingertips, and the internet. Igloo gives you your user comments like buttons and the ability to add content based on permissions, with drag-and-drop widgets and a WYSIWYG editor. In other words, if they can use Facebook or Twitter or Google+, they can use your new Igloo intranet. Of course, a beautiful and intuitive interface isn't very useful if your users can't access it on their devices, which is why Igloo is built with a responsive design that automatically reformats to your phone or your tablet. It's also customizable. This is important. Whether you're a large enterprise using SharePoint or a fast-growing startup with a hodgepodge of tools and platforms, you can now create an intranet that matches your branding. And branding, folks, makes the difference between success and failure. Now, how about security? Well, Igloo has 256-bit SSL encryption baked into a variety of access authentication and identity modules that ensure that only your authorized users have access to the information that they should be able to access. They also offer plans starting as low as $3 per user per month. And unlike other solutions, you get full access to Igloo's entire suite of tools, all for one low price. No nitpicking and fee piracy here. Volume pricing is also available, and it's used by government agencies and companies like Hulu, Inventive Health, American Family Insurance, and IP Switch. If they use it, you should use it too. Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to sign up now and try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit. That's igloosoftware.com/twit. And when you sign up through our link, you'll throw us some love. You can get your own Igloo for up to 10 people absolutely free for as long as you want. Plus, you get the satisfaction of helping out the Twilight Riot. That's igloosoftware.com/twit. igloosoftware.com/twit. And we thank Igloo for the support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the bites. This one is sort of a no-brainer. This is what we have to kick the week off with. Windows 10 dropped. And yes, it was a mad dash to get the final build. It was a mad dash for people who wanted to create their own media because they wanted to do several installs. Microsoft actually learned from their experience with Windows 8. And for those folks who signed up for the upgrade beforehand, it just automatically showed up on their machines, which was kind of magical. But Cheebert, I want to throw this out to you first. Have you heard much about the enterprise features of Windows 10? Many people have been focusing the early reviews on how they've changed the interface and how they brought over some interesting features or some of the things they're complaining about. But hidden in the big rush has been that Windows 10 is supposed to be really, really enterprise friendly.
Well, the only thing that I've really heard about is that they've, shall we say, jumped in with both feet on biometrics. Before it was just kind of, you know, oh, by the way, you can do fingerprint scanning and things like that. But the virtual secure mode is baked right in, so you can have access to the biometrics without feeling like it was tacked on or duct taped on to the system like the previous versions. And what's nice about having it actually in the kernel and be part of the Windows 10 API is that means developers are going to be able to take advantage of this. Because keep in mind, a lot of the biometrics are used in healthcare and banking. And I've had to develop some, electronic fund transfer systems for a bank a long time ago, and getting it to do fingerprint scanning or iris scanning was just an amazing, amazing amount of pain. So Microsoft is basically taking a lot of input from corporate America, well, corporate world, and saying, hey, what kinds of things do you need? And one of the top ones is, hey, if you're going to do biometrics, bake it in so that it's harder to hack, bake it in so it's easier for developers to use. And gee, wouldn't it be great if we could get rid of passwords and do something that's more secure, easy, and something that people aren't going to forget?
Yeah, that's actually one of the most easily accessible enterprise-friendly features of Windows 10, and it's baking in a whole lot more ways to authenticate. So right now, out of the box, it's going to include the ability to use biometrics both from fingerprints and from palm vein prints, which is kind of in vogue now. It's if you've used a handprint scanner recently, it's this part of your biometric data is actually more readable and unique than your fingertips. And it also does things like iris scans, face scans, but face scans with near IR sensors so that they could tell if someone's using a picture or wearing a mask. So that is interesting. But as you said at the very beginning, the part that really has me excited is the use of the virtual secure mode. Now, this was explained to me as a container. So you take everything from the Windows operating system that has to do with authentication, and you put it into its own virtual piece, a container. Now, that container runs independent of the kernel. Now, here's the cool thing. Microsoft says that even if the kernel gets exploited, so, for example, someone manages to run malware, because the authentication is run in a separate container that runs outside of the OS, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be giving out the credentials. You're not going to allow people to have access to your passwords and biometric data. That, I think, is actually kind of cool. Now, there is something else that's included in this whole password push, and I want to throw this over to you, Curtis. Windows 10 is supposed to have FIDO. That's Fast Identity Online. And it's this idea that you can use either the existing public key infrastructure, which most of us have played with, or you can have Windows generate key pairs. And those key pairs can be kept in the TPM module, which allows you to have secure communications between clients and, for example, a Windows 2016 or an Azure AD server. In fact, you need either Windows Server 2016 or Azure AD to make that work. Is that something that you see as a killer enterprise feature in the sense that people will actually go out of their way to fund it, to adopt it, or is it just like when TPM came out, which was, it's a nice idea, but we don't really feel the impetus to push for it?
I think it's something that a lot of companies are going to use. And one of the reasons is this notion of being able to use Azure AD. You know, this is something that many organizations have been waiting for, a way to integrate Azure with their own AD infrastructure, primarily through the access points. And that's something that this allows, and it should be in very good shape for them. So while it's not going to be fast, I don't see a lot of companies really implementing this before mid-2016 at the earliest. I do think it's something that over time will build into a major uptake for Windows and for Azure.
Yeah. Now, something else that has been added, and this I actually do like, because we've talked about this on Twite as something that we want to see in future editions of Windows, is more support for mobile device management. Now, Windows 8 actually had pretty decent mobile device management, but with Azure, Windows 10 now allows you to have a single sign-on for all resources within a domain, and that domain doesn't have to be on the same physical premise. So, campus. So we talked about this with Lisa Lorenzin before about taking the identity and stretching it out over a wider area. I like this. I like the fact that that's going to be baked into Windows 10. Now, this allows admins to centrally manage devices that are allowed to access resources on a domain. It also means that access can be granted on a privilege role rather than on a role rather than a privilege basis. In other words, someone with a certain position will automatically be granted access to the resources needed by the position that he or she has. Cheebert, where do you see this being used? Where will we see the use of more mobile device management, and how do you foresee it being implemented in an environment like, say, a university?
Well, actually, this whole concept of having your identity controlled by Active Directory is been a concept that Microsoft has been wanting to implement much, much further for a very, very long time. When I was on the Redmond campus, one of the things that was very prevalent when I first got there was all these people had those little blue Microsoft cards. They were some of the first using smart cards. And in order to even use their machine, they had to have the smart card in the reader on their machine. But it was cool because it was an all-encompassing. It was their like a credit card in the commissaries. It was you could do identity management for the locks. It was more of an integration. It's part of this long vision that was actually part of Bill Gates's big things. Gee, wouldn't it be great if the world revolved around Active Directory? Now, I'm not saying that as a snarky thing, nor am I saying it's a bad thing. Active Directory is unique, well, relatively unique, in that it has an extensibility that a lot of other directory systems might have, but are a lot clunkier. Open LDAP can be done, but you better make sure you know Open LDAP fairly well before you start modifying the scheme. In Active Directory, adding things is not tough. There's a lot of cool things about Active Directory. Microsoft has actually stored smart card credentials in Active Directory for a very long time. So what this does is now we're starting to get to the point where my identity is me, not necessarily the device I'm on. So the whole thing with the palm print scanning, the retina scanning, fingerprint scanning, things like that, the biometrics, they want to be able to integrate that in so that you have ubiquitous single sign-on, whether it's your desktop, whether it's your mobile phone, whether it's access to your office. And maybe someday, very soon, it's going to be integrated into things like your entry into your home. So from a consumer standpoint, it means I'm going to be doing a lot less of trying to remember my password. I've got a password vault app that's got many thousands of passwords in there. And while I'm using it and it does help, it's still a pain. I would love to be able to identify myself without having to go and open up that app, without having to go and juggle several thousand passwords, without having to worry about someone getting access to the password vault. From an enterprise standpoint, it's going to be a pretty big deal. So I think that should go to Curtis. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a big deal, not only because of what it does for the users, but because of how easy it's going to be to make those things happen from an IT standpoint. We've long had the ability to make a lot of this happen. You've pointed out some of the projects that you've been able to work on in the past, but you've also pointed out the amazing amount of effort that was required to bring those projects to fruition. And I think what this is going to do is, by integrating everything together, make it so much easier for IT to make it happen in a cost-effective manner that we'll see many, many more enterprises going in this direction.
We do have a question in the chat room or a statement from W.A. Wisp. He actually runs his own wireless service provider, but he's talking about this password protection, this new mode of authentication. And he says, look, it needs to be battle tested. They need to make sure they're only stored in the hash, which actually is interesting because that's exactly what it's doing. Because of that virtual secure mode, the container is only going to contain full-length, fully randomized hashes of the authentication information. So the nice thing is, even if you were able somehow to violate the container, you're still not going to get the biometric data that will help you to get into other devices. Going hand in hand along with more support for mobile device management and for this really nice use of a containerized authentication system is something that Microsoft is calling Device Guard. Now, it's a very simple concept. Your users can only install the software from developers that you trust. It sounds like a very simple idea, but that's actually a big thing. Let me throw this over to you first, Curtis. The installation of rogue software has long been an issue for BYOD, and that's been one of the biggest issues that IT admins have, which is people bring in their devices, they've installed or their son or their daughter has installed some sort of game on the device that now grants access to things inside of the network that it shouldn't. This new feature of Windows 10 not only will lock down what can and cannot be installed, but you can even do it on a personal private basis, which means if someone tries to bring a device in, it will actually tell them, I cannot give you access to these resources until this is removed. Is that a big thing, or is that just PR fluff?
I think it's a big thing. And again, it does a couple of things. Number one, it tends to bring the walls in a little bit. We've talked for a couple of years here on Twiat about the fact that through BYOD policies and people working at home, the perimeter of your enterprise network is actually wherever your users tend to be. What this does is say, no, we're going to have perimeters that are established in the IT department that are imposed upon anyone who wants to bring a device in. And again, it allows IT to do this in a very cost-effective manner. It doesn't require lots of extra hardware and software. It doesn't require massive configuration efforts. It's there as part of the core operating system. So I think this has some huge impacts coming on companies that are doing significant mobile workforces, on companies that are doing a lot of work from home, on those that have fairly liberal BYOD programs. But one of the things it does, and this is great from Microsoft's perspective, is that it encourages all of those companies to say, you know what, if you want to play with us, you've got to have Windows 10. And that is really where the game is going to be fought. If people can say, you know, you can have any device you want as long as it's running Windows 10, then Microsoft has won a huge battle in the market.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's huge. When we talk about operating systems, and Curtis, actually, I remember you talked about this, what, 8 months ago, where enterprises don't really like adopting new operating systems, especially if the old operating system was working just fine. If your enterprise is running Windows 7 and everything seems to be working fine, you're not going to spend what will be a tremendous amount of money and a lot of time resources to move to an operating system just because it's faster, just because it's shinier, just because it has a few new features that you really don't care about. But the ability to tell an IT person that upgrading to this Windows 10 desktop and Windows Server 2016 or Azure Active Directory will give you the ability to, with granularity, control what your users are using on their devices and tell them what they can have at home and what they can have in the office and what is acceptable. That's something that I think they'd upgrade for, right? I mean, that's worth the cost.
That is a significant benefit. And as you say, what we have right now is a situation where there are all kinds of operating systems that are good enough. And once you have an operating system that's good enough, you have to have some sort of major set of benefits to move off of that to something else. Windows 10 is building its case as we go through this list of enterprise class features. You know, one of these probably wouldn't be enough. But when you start adding one to another, to another, to another, all of a sudden you have a compelling case for saying, you know what, we can make the change. If we are within, let's say, a year of a hardware refresh cycle anyway, it's worth going ahead and doing it. If we have a BYOD policy that specifies machines, it's worth limiting the number of possibilities in that pool of candidates, and even saying to those who have chosen other devices, you know what, you need to come back inside the Windows 10 fold. So I think that what Microsoft done is very smart in listening to the enterprise customers and saying, you know what, we're not just going to give you one or two things. We're going to do our best to give you everything you've asked for.
Chee, I want to give you the last word on this, on Device Guard, because one of the features that this allows, and by the way, this kind of a feature has been available with third-party software on Windows, but this is the first time that it's available inside the operating system itself, is because of MDM and because you've got role-based permissions rather than policy-based permissions, you can specify as an administrator that once a device is joined to a network, if it changes from that default configuration with the software that you've allowed, it will lose its previously granted privileges for resources on that network. To me, that's probably one of the best things, one of the best tools I can have as an administrator, because it means I don't have to worry about someone making a change to a device that I've secured.
Well, yeah, and the whole idea is it's a greater, longer vision. Microsoft is slowly providing the foundation to utilize things that are ubiquitous, like TPM. I've decades and almost 3 decades ago, I gave a speech on why ubiquitous strong encryption is so important to e-commerce. When you have something that can be trusted, when you have something that is very hard to hack, when you have something that gives you access to strong encryption and being able to exchange encrypted tokens, lots and lots of things can happen, especially when it's exposed at the API level. So I can see e-commerce being a lot easier. Microtransactions have always been hard because of the lack of a trusted system. But when you have this kind of trust as a foundation, man, all kinds of neat things can happen.
Absolutely. Now, let's move on to one last piece, one last enterprise-friendly piece of Windows 10 that I really like. That's EDP, Enterprise Data Protection. I actually think this is huge because we've had a lot of issues over the last 18 months with data leaking out of an enterprise. EDP is very simple. It puts every file gets its own container. And Windows acts as the access broker for access to that container. Every container belongs to a location, be it home, mobile, so you can divide data between personal and corporate, or mobile, corporate, business, whatever it is, whatever divisions your IT guy wants to come up with. That container will belong to that location, and the network, especially if you're running, again, an Active Directory Azure server or Windows Server 2016, will automatically be encrypted so that resource access isn't granted unless you, again, have that privilege, that role that should give you access to that particular container. It's going to be cross-platform, so it's going to work on Windows, it's going to work on OS X, it's going to work on iOS, it's going to work on Android. And here's the killer. I want to throw this one to you first, Curtis. It's going to require Office 2016. This is one of these threads that's run through this entire product announcement, which is there are all these really killer features, but you need Windows Server 2016 or Azure Active Directory, and now you need Windows Office or Microsoft Office 2016 along with Windows 10 to make it all work. This is Microsoft, in effect, saying, this is our opening salvo as our as-a-service environment. This is why you want to come with us to what we're releasing now.
Oh, absolutely, because it's important to note that if a customer is on Office 365, the odds are good they already have Office 2016. So this is only an expensive proposition for those companies that aren't already consumers or customers of the subscription-based Office 365. And if you're going to be looking at upgrading all of your permanent licenses, it might be a good time, Microsoft's reps will tell you, to look at what happens if you go to the subscription model. So you're absolutely right. This is a way to really encourage people to go ahead, take the step, and get the Microsoft Office subscription. And if you're getting the Microsoft Office subscription and you like it, well, you know, it's so easy just to go ahead and have that Windows subscription too.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, you know what? As long as you've got this one, get that one too. They go together. It's like chocolate and peanut butter. Now, Cheebert, I want to give you the last word here. When we start talking about Microsoft Office, when we start talking about Windows 10, when we start talking about the different server options that you can now get, and as we said, as it now pushes us towards more of a Microsoft as a service, do you see this as vindication for the decision to let Windows 10 go for free for Windows 7 and 8 users? Because now it seems like, oh yeah, now it totally makes sense. You want people to get on this ecosystem because once they see all these security options, they're going to be hooked and they're going to stay with us as subscribers for the rest of their business days.
Yeah, this is Satya Nadella's vision. Obviously, this had to started way before Satya Nadella took reins, but it certainly vindicates the Microsoft ecosystem. No other player has the breadth that Microsoft has for tying all these pieces together. It's always been, well, you have to have a home machine, you have to have a corporate machine, you have to have your mobile device. They're all treated as islands. Microsoft is really the first. It's really starting to go and tie all the pieces together. So, I think this is one of those foundation pieces where I think I'm going to have Jarvis pretty soon, and I want Jarvis to be able to use my credentials to go and proxy things, to do shopping for me, to tie together my Internet of Things, especially because, keep in mind, Windows 10 embedded works on things like the Intel Edison, Intel Galileo, and things like that. So we're going to start seeing more and more pieces being able to use the Windows ecosystem to advance Internet of Things in a secure manner, which is, I think, one of the things that a lot of IoT people have kind of forgotten. Why do you have unencrypted? So good on you, Microsoft. Thank you very much. I've been a strong supporter of ubiquitous strong encryption, and I think I'm starting to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I think there's a lot of us who feel that way. It's sort of like, oh, thank goodness you had a vision, because for a while there it felt like we were in a rudderless boat. Now, I will say one last word. If you want to play with Win 10 Enterprise and you're an insider, or you want to apply to the insider program, you can get it right now. It will work until October 1st, where they're going to shut it off and you'll actually need a license. But just go ahead and Google for Windows 10 Enterprise and you'll be able to get it. I'm getting a hand from the classroom from Curtis. Did you have an update about that?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. Insiders can get a free trial that expires on October 1st. But if you are a TechNet member, you can get a 90-day trial with no expiration date. So you can delay a little bit, get a full 90 days, regardless of that October 1st deadline.
Much better if you're TechNet, do what Curtis says, because no expiration sounds so much better than expires on October 1st. Now, when we come back, we're going to have a chat with Lisa LORENZIN, the Principal Solutions Architect from PulseSecure.net. She's got a few bits of wisdom for those folks who maybe want to do BYOD and mobile workspace in the future. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take another break to thank the second sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. And of course, it's going to start with a question. And the question is this: do you run your own business? Because if you do, you know that your employees are who you are. They're the ones who determine if you're going to be successful or if you're going to fail. They're the public face of who you are. You're branding, as it were. Now, if that is the case, if either you own your own business or if you hire for a business, you understand that you need quality people in order to have that quality presence, to have that quality brand, to have success. And guess what? Right now is the best time to hire because people are coming back from their summer vacations. Your competitors are on vacation. They're in between projects, and some of the best hires are just coming off their vacations, which means they're ready to get back to work, and they're ready for you to snatch them up before someone else gets to them first. In other words, for folks, it's the best time to get the candidates that you need. But you know what? You have to do it the right way. You can't just post to a job board. You can't just post to one site because you're not going to get the volume. You're not going to get the wide net that you need to cast in order to find the person who doesn't just match your skill requirements, but also matches your culture, which is why we're happy to have ZipRecruiter as a sponsor of the Twiat Riot. Thanks to ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites with a single click and be instantly matched to candidates from over 4 million resumes. But you don't have to listen to me. Dr. Robert Martinez is an actual ZipRecruiter client, and he wrote, ZipRecruiter has been great at every level of service. Easy to use, professional, and the support has been second to none. We were very selective in choosing our employees, and it's clear that ZipRecruiter is as well to offer such great customer experience. Folks, listen to Dr. Martinez. Just post once, and within 24 hours, watch your candidates roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. ZipRecruiter has been used by over 400,000 businesses, and you can try it now for free. Getting the right people for your company is so important. Why do you want to leave it up to chance? Today, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Twiat. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Twiat. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. We welcome back to the show a favorite of mine, a woman who has not just the technical skill, but really a nice philosophical view of what it means to be a worker in today's environment. Miss Lisa LORENZIN, the Principal Solutions Architect from PulseSecure.net. Lisa, thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you for having me back.
Now, you have always had a very interesting view of the transition of the worker over the last, let's say, 2-3 decades. We started with this idea that everyone had to be inside the campus. You were inside the premise, and they put a big firewall against everyone, so you had the good guys inside and the bad guys outside, and that's how it was supposed to be, nice and simple. But that's changed over the last few generations. Can you tell me what we've seen?
Certainly. When I was working at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we all sat at our desk, we worked on a PC, and putting in wireless was, are we certain that we want to be broadcasting signal throughout the building? Somebody might sit in the parking lot. And those were legitimate concerns at the time, but I don't think we had any idea what was really coming at us, which is this migration of, initially you have remote workers, you need access after hours, you want to allow people to connect to a campus that they don't report to. So we start to have client to gateway VPN connectivity, and then you start to see guests coming into the environment. So you go from that initial environment where you've got the hard, crunchy exterior and the soft, chewy interior like an M&M, and you start to blend it. It used to be that everyone inside your firewall was trusted and anyone outside your firewall was untrusted. Then you start to see people doing work from outside the firewall, people coming into the environment that aren't employees. So you get this crossing of that boundary. And then smartphones and tablets happened, and that whole concept accelerated, got turned up to 11. So at this point, the perimeter of any network is, frankly, the perimeter of PulseSecure's network is my rooted Android phone. And as that perimeter moves, you were talking earlier about authentication, the ability to have a single identity and a single authentication that follows you through different environments. And that also carries the need for security policies that follow you through these environments as well.
Lisa, the interesting thing about that is we speak about it as a matter of fact. Yeah, of course, you've got mobile workers. People are going to work from home. They're going to VPN in. They're going to be at a cafe and be answering business emails. That's par for the course. But I'm going to date myself. When I started, you had to get extraordinary permission to be able to not be in the office, because there was this idea of, well, if I don't see you, then that means you're not working. And even for teleworkers, because we called them teleworkers back then because everything was over the telephone, but even for teleworkers, I remember there were these draconian policies in place so that your manager could actually tell that you were doing something, that you weren't just at home connected via modem and in your pajamas sipping coffee. And that is such a breakthrough. And we can look at it and we can laugh and go, look how silly we were. But here's the more interesting thing, and I think I'd really like to get your comment on this. We changed so much with what we believe is acceptable as far as working off the campus, off of premise. But a lot of our security models are still the old model. They still assume that the good guys are inside the walls. That's changed as well, yes?
Absolutely. I'm possibly the pathological case of this. The first thing I do in the morning is check my email. It's often one of the last things I do in the evening, although I'm trying to be better about that. And I'm much more likely to respond to an email, especially on a day that I'm traveling, which is, most of them, from my phone than from my laptop. And yet the amount of security and control that a normal enterprise has over that phone, that tablet, that smart device that we're doing all this on is so much lower than the amount of control that's applied to a traditional operating system, to a laptop or a desktop. I think that the extent of the security risks that are introduced by these mobile OSs and these mobile devices, every so often somebody leaves a phone in a taxi and it's not the end of the world, but pretty soon I think you're going to see a large, like with this latest Android vulnerability, 950 million vulnerable Android devices, and all you have to do is send an MMS message to them. we need to be recognizing that we need to protect the data almost more so than the device, because endpoint security is a losing battle. You can never fully secure a laptop. You can't even think about fully securing a mobile device in most cases. So how do you protect the data on that device, and how do you ensure that the user who's making the connection is the user that you think it is? It really needs to be a shift in focus.
I like that. And actually, endpoint protection is a losing battle. I think that should be the mantra of every security professional today, which is, hey, guess what? This whole idea that you're going to stop the bad guys at some arbitrary line, that doesn't exist anymore. If the bad guys are inside the lines, you better start thinking in that way. In the same vein, we've been talking about how workers have been moving in and out of the perimeter. But there's another aspect to this, and that is the data itself has moved in and out of the perimeter. It used to be, again, back in the old day when I was grumpy and connected via a 300 baud modem through an acoustic coupler, the thing I needed was on a server on the company's campus in a basement somewhere, and I could only access it over that phone line, and when I disconnected, there was no trace of it on my local computer. We don't do that anymore. Not only are we going to have local copies on devices that are connected to networks, but the data itself is probably no longer just inside your campus. What has that changed in this whole security endpoint calculus?
That's really shifted how and where you can apply security policies. And it's also shifted what the baseline for connecting to this information should be. So, for example, I work for a company that makes SSL VPN gateways. And when the model is that all your data is on campus, it makes perfect sense to force everyone through a VPN tunnel to access that data. You need to protect the data in motion. But as that data migrates into a hybrid cloud or a software as a service provider, the data access is no longer between the user and a corporate data center. It's between the user and corporate data in this variety of locations with this variety of providers. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to make me hairpin through a VPN to corporate and then out to the provider. That's a waste of bandwidth at corporate, and it's probably applying dual encryption because all of that data should be running over TLS because it's 2015. If your software as a service provider isn't encrypting your web-based connection to them, they're going to be out of business momentarily. So we need to start thinking about contextual authentication and decoupling the two core concepts of a VPN, which are the connectivity piece and the encryption protecting that data in motion, from the authorization piece, which is whether the user is allowed to access that data in the first place. If I'm sitting inside an enterprise and I'm on a corporate desktop, then it's pretty easy to determine what my desktop is, what my platform is, whether it's compliant with security policies. If I'm at home and I'm accessing Salesforce or Google Docs or Office 365 or the zillion other software as a service options, there's a lot less control of the platform I'm accessing it from, and there's a lot less ability to control the traffic between me and that provider as well. So I think that security considerations need to start to think about encrypted tunneling as infrastructure. It's under the hood. We should be able to take it for granted. Now we have to be vigilant about that, make sure people aren't doing stupid things like, using poor choices of cipher suites or poorly implementing the encryption over those tunnels, or over which those tunnels run. But I do believe that the focus needs to be on figuring out how to extend authentication and authorization and compliance checking into all of the places that our data now lives. Contextual authentication and contextual authorization.
I want to bring the guys back in on that, because that contextual authorization, that sounds to me a lot like what Microsoft's trying to do with that enterprise data protection. The whole idea of containerizing every bit of information, every file, and then being able to contextualize it and having the network automatically set encryption as a matter of communications protocol rather than something that's added on the top. So let's get into that. I want to jump everyone in, but first, let's take one last break before I can take us all home uninterrupted to thank the third sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, did you know that the average office worker spends almost 6 hours a day standing at their desk? It's true. I actually looked that up. And Didn't believe it, but yeah, it makes sense. That's what we do. That's most of our lives. We sit in front of a monitor and we process and we lose track of time. Well, that's not just bad for us. It's bad for our bodies. It's bad for our well-being. We're not meant to be sedentary for that long. Now, if you've got a sit-up, stand-down desk, that's fine. You can move your office around. You can make sure that you occasionally get off your duff, but most of us don't. And most of us don't because it's a hassle, because we don't want to reorganize our office, because we don't want to get authorization to buy something new for the office. Well, folks, we don't have to do that thanks to the third sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, Veridesk. Veridesk offers a variety of high-quality, height-adjustable desks that let you easily switch between sitting and standing. And unlike other options, you don't have to get rid of your existing workspace. Veridesk converts your existing desk or cubicle into a standing desk with no assembly, installation, or boss approval required. It comes fully assembled. You just pull it out of the box, put it on your desk, and place your monitors and gear on it. That means you're going to be ready to work in no time. And it also means you don't have to give away those cubby holes and that comfortable drawer filled with all the stuff that you've grown accustomed to over the years. When you want to stand, you simply pull the handles on either side, and the spring-loaded Veridesk will rise to any of 11 different height settings along with your keyboard and your monitors. And because Veridesk sits on top of your existing workspace, it's easier to set up than other standing desks. And again, it doesn't require you to completely redo your workspace. It's also more affordable than other standing desks, with prices starting at just $275 plus shipping. Lifehacker included Veridesk in their 5 best standing desks guide, and it has also been featured on Product Hunt and Gear Patrol. We've got a Veridesk Pro Plus 36 here in the Brick House, and it got stolen by one of our editors, Anthony. He actually took it, and everyone else in the office kind of wants one. So we're bugging Veridesk because we look at it, we're like, yeah, I'd like to stand up. I'd like to be able to bring my monitors up to the level that I feel comfortable working at, and I'd like to be able to move between sitting and standing whenever I please. I tell you, folks, once you get a sit-stand desk from Veridesk, you're not going to want to go back. Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to try Veridesk today. Go to Veridesk.com to learn more about the Veridesk and check out their wide range of height-adjustable desks for your desk or cubicle. And when you purchase a Veridesk, be sure to tell them that you heard about it on Twit. Throw us some love. That's Veridesk, Veridesk.com, Veridesk. And we thank them for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. I want to bring my co-host back into this very feng shui security conversation. Cheebert, this idea of contextualizing security in a world where neither the user nor the data is where we had previously thought it to be. That sounds like something that, well, it's past its time, right? We should have it already.
Yeah, I totally agree. The tools have been there. Microsoft's Direct Access sounded great. You know, basically you're always connected through an encrypted pipe, but it was so cumbersome and so time consuming to set up and manage that I hardly saw anyone implement it. And so by having this type of ubiquitous connectivity, secure connectivity, I think we're going to start seeing the ability to be able to trust our connections. I really like the idea of the containerization, because then as I make the connection, I can go and connect to my data sources. But when I go get off, it's vapor, it disappears. Really and truly, this is really feeling like old mainframe day. I like the ability to be able to go and have ubiquitous connectivity, but separate my public and private life. One of the people in the chat room were saying, hey, what does it mean for university students and things like that? And one of the comments I made back was, well, this sounds great. This sounds like it's going to work wonderfully. It's got more promise than a lot of the other systems that I've seen, you know, the false starts from Microsoft or the false starts from Novell. But I give one piece of warning to our friends at Microsoft. Your cost per seat is what's going to be the major reason why people are going to waffle on deployment. Even with the huge academic discounts, but when you're starting to talk about 250,000 users, even with those massive academic discounts, it's still going to be too expensive for a lot of colleges. So if Microsoft wants to be able to get this ubiquitous service out to the kids that are just learning about this and will want it when they get out of college and go into the workday force, Microsoft is also going to have to revamp their pricing on seats for Active Directory. So there's some things still to go, but I think the plumbing is there. Let's go see how well Microsoft teaches people how to use it.
Curtis, I want to throw to you before we go back to Lisa. Something that Cheebert said was, it feels like old mainframe days, and it does. But the interesting thing is that this technology has existed. We've had the ability to do these sorts of security things, but only now does it seem like it's approaching the point where it's a turnkey solution. If it's built into the operating system, I am much more apt to turn it on than if I had to build a security system myself. Is this enough? Does this now change the way that the enterprise operates? Do we start using best practices models like Lisa's talking about by using contextualized security? Or are we going to get to the point where CTOs and CIOs say, this is great, it looks good, but deployment costs are way too high, we're still not going to do it?
Well, the question comes down to what those deployment costs are. And we've had this particular argument for years here on Twyet. We know that security is a matter of cost versus risk analysis. In other words, we can judge what the risk is. We know what the cost is to mitigate that risk. Now, where does it come down? Is the risk worth taking? And I think what this does is it changes the equation because, as Brian pointed out, the tools to make this sort of solution happen have been available for a very long time. It's just been that due to the cost of acquisition of the tools, and especially due to the cost of implementing the solution, it's been too expensive. Most CIOs and most CFOs have said, you know what, we could do it, but frankly, we don't see the risk being that great. Now, with the cost coming down, the risk to be mitigated can be much lower. So people can say, yes, now the equation has come around. Now the cost is such that we feel comfortable going ahead and implementing a much better solution, knowing that the cost is justified. I think that things like this, by changing the cost-benefit equation, make security much more likely to be deployed in a great way at a great deal more enterprise sites.
Lisa, my security Zen guru, I want to give you the last philosophical word on this. We have gone from a world in which we have got a perimeter, we've got firewalls, we've got data and people on the inside, we've got the bad guys on the outside, to an enterprise in which both the people and the data are nebulous. They're inside, they're outside, devices move back and forth along with the people, and we're expected to keep everyone connected securely. What pearls of wisdom would you want to give to that IT admin who's pitching his or her CTO or CIO as to why they need money to deploy X in order to get contextualized security? What's the golden set of words, the golden phrase that's going to make that CTO or CIO understand that, no, this is table stakes now. This is not an option. This is something you do or we get breached.
If I had that magic bullet, I'd be making $1 zillion as a consultant. But I will say, what I believe is that how we talk about this matters. And you mentioned teleworkers earlier. We've talked about mobile work. We've got all these BYOD, BYOC, BYOX. All of those are markers. We have a word for it because it's outside of the norm. And I believe that the point that we need to be making is that these are no longer the exception. This is all just work. And so we need to be considering the security mechanisms that extend to this not as exceptional and not necessarily as something new, but as table stakes. We have remote, we have mobile, we have telework, we have smartphones. All of this needs to be baked into a security plan, not considered an extraordinary expense.
Oh, if only, if only. You're absolutely right. When you say it like that, it makes sense. It's like, well, this is doing business today. This is not something in addition to doing business. This is how you would do business if you actually wanted to do business properly. Maybe that's what you say. So IT people, you have it here from Lisa LORENZIN. Walk into your CTO's office and just say, hey, I guess you're not a businessman. That's going to work out really well for you. I want to thank my panel for being part of the best dang hour of Enterprise show this side of the universe. That's according to 9 out of 10 security modules in Windows 9. That's right, folks. Windows 9. It was out there. You missed it. I want to thank, of course, Lisa LORENZIN for coming back onto This Week in Enterprise Tech. It is always a pleasure to have you. Every time you come on, we feel just a bit more at one with Security Zen. Could you please tell the folks where they can find you? Where can they find your work? Where are you presenting next? And where can they find Pulse Secure?
Pulse Secure is www.pulsesecure.net. I believe the next thing I'm speaking at is a NIST conference in DC in September. And you can find me on Twitter at @LLorenzin, but be warned that that's not a professional account, so it's mostly profanity, travel grumbling, and food porn.
I'm actually okay with that. I think that's what most IT people need. Lisa, again, it's been an absolute pleasure and an absolute honor. We're going to have you back on. Let's have you on a regular basis come back, because it's always nice to get the view from security professionals who actually talk to other security professionals.
Sounds like fun to me. Thank you.
Of course, I need to thank my stalwart co-host who comes into the show even when he's deathly ill with some strain of bird and swine and dog flu. I don't know. Mr. Brian Chee, the director of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory. Cheebert, you're heading out to meet up with me in a couple of days. Are you going to get me sick?
Hopefully not. I no longer have a fever, and they say once the fever is broken, you're not contagious. But by the time I see you, I will have had a few more days to get rid of this. I am no longer, well, I'm kind of coughing up a lung, but it's getting better. So I would say I'm probably not going to get you infected, but, no tongue.
Okay. Yes, I think that will be our motto for the week of Black Hat DEF CON. All right. Someone who won't be joining us at Black Hat and DEF CON, but he will most definitely be with us in spirit, is Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis from Information Week Radio. Could you please tell the folks what they can expect on your program? What will you be talking about during this week of Daring Security?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is looking at Interop Radio starting up again. And we've had already a great show on leadership starring General John Michel of the Air Force. I hope people will go into our archives, look at that, stream it. It's great stuff. I'm also writing articles looking at deep profiles on the companies that were awarded the Information Week Elite 100 this year. Some great profiles. Look them up there on informationweek.com.
Curtis, Cheebert, Lisa, thank you so very much for being part of this episode. Of course, we also want to thank you, the loyal audience of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Every week you download our show, you watch us live, you listen to us in the car, you watch us on the big screen or on your laptop, your desktop, your tablet. You know what? We want to make it easier for you, because without you, we wouldn't have a show. Just go to our show page at twit.tv/Twiet. That's right, Twiet, This Week in Enterprise Tech, and you'll find all of our back episodes. If you want to find out what we said about previous topics, about when Windows 10 first came out, about when Windows 8 first came out, you could find it all right there. Again, twit.tv/Twiet. And there you'll be able to find a drop-down menu so you can automatically get every episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech downloaded onto your device of choice. Also, don't forget that we do this show live every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. Just go to live.twit.tv and you'll be able to catch the pre-show, the post-show, and everything in between. And as long as you're watching live, go ahead and jump into the chat room at irc.twit.tv. I've got you in a little window right down there. It's a fantastic way to interact with us during the shows. I try to type back when I'm not too engaged with our guests and with our hosts. But it's also a nice place for you to be part of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Finally, thanks to everyone here who makes this show possible, to Lisa and Leo for letting me do This Week in Enterprise Tech, to Carson, my super producer, to Brian Burnett, who, again, is my TD. It's always fun to have him back. Brian, I understand that you do a show on Twit TV. What is it again? I forget.
You know, I think it's called Know How.
Oh, I hate
that
your
much.
co-host. I hate your co-host.
You know what?
You're good.
How dare you speak ill of my co-host? I wouldn't be able to do that show without him. Yeah, you can find me doing Know How, where I think our last episode, some bacteria escaped. I'm not really sure where it was. I left it in my desk, and now it's missing. So
That's right. We took a swab of your ear, didn't we?
Hey, okay, to be fair, we didn't take a swab of anyone else's ear, so we have no idea how bad just my ear is.
Oh, God, excuse me, Brian.
We can take a swab of that, too.
Yeah, speaking of poor Brian, you know, he knows what I'm dealing with, too. Yep.
We'll take a swab of Brian as well. You know what? I think this is going to be just a new MO. Anytime you're a guest on a Twitch show, we're going to swab you.
Ugh, yeah, that should be. I think you have to sign a waiver for that. But I'll also be joining you at DEF CON in a little bit of Black Hat, I believe. But so that should be fun. I haven't done that before. Shoot some segments.
Speaking of that, if you are at Black Hat DEF CON this coming week, you will be able to find Brian, Cheebert, and myself. Come up and say hi. We're probably going to be shooting, but we always love to meet our audience. Of course, that also means that next week's episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is going to be pre-recorded. In fact, we're going to pre-record it in just about 2 hours here, so you can come to live.twit.tv and watch that. That's because there is no way in God's good green earth we're going to try to connect from the DEF CON show floor. That would be suicide, folks. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer. This has been This Week in Enterprise Tech. And remember, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.